The Damascus cover. September 21st. Dov Elon sat in the dirt in his cell, leaning against the whitewashed wall. The cubicle, 3 feet by 5 feet, was windowless. The air stank of urine. A can, his wash basin, lay on its side in one corner. A thin blanket covered the mound of damp straw piled in the other. Dov's eyes rested on the food trap in the door. Not long before, he'd heard the banshee cry of the muezzin, beckoning the Muslim inmates to prayer. He assumed a bowl of jasmine tea would soon be pushed through the food trap, but he wasn't sure. The previous day, he'd been transferred from Tadmor prison, near the ancient Greek ruins of Palmyra in the north, to Sigin al-Maza, on the outskirts of Damascus. He didn't know if his new guards would feed him regularly or at random intervals, so he waited, listening for approaching footsteps, not moving. For every shift in position arched pain through his bruised body. After a while, he closed his eyes. The minutes fell away. There were no sounds. The silence hummed in his ears. With the grating of wood against metal, the heavy door swung open, jarring Dov out of semi-conscious stupor. "Get up," the guard said in Arabic. Although the Israeli understood his captor perfectly, he didn't respond. "Stand up!" The guard gripped his kurbash, a leaden whip made from the coarse hairs of a bull's tail. "My pleasure," Dov said, struggling to his feet, refusing to let the pain rippling through him register on his face. Several of his ribs were cracked, and the open wounds on the backs of his legs, inflicted by palm frond lashings, festered with infection. Haltingly, Dov followed the guard through the dimly lit underground corridor, past 2 narrow passages lined with the 14 al-Adem, death row cells. Then past the damp Moabit section, containing those serving life sentences, until they reached an iron gate. The guard fitted a single key into the lock. The bolt clattered, and the metal squeaked loudly as he pushed the gate open. Farther on, the corridor walls changed from gray to white. As they mounted a flight of concrete stairs, the temperature rose. By the time Dov was led into the second-floor interrogation room, lines of perspiration glistened on his brow. In the center of the room stood a high straw stool, supported by wooden legs. Opposite it was a desk, uncluttered, with an upholstered chair. The plaster walls were bare, the lone window closed, the blades of the fan overhead still. The guard motioned to the stool with the butt of his kurbash. Dov moved toward it and sat. His legs dangled. Neither they nor his back had any support. Outside, the sun beat down on the desert. The sweat began to trickle from Dov's body, dampening his brown prison shirt. According to a thermometer by the door, the room temperature stood at 102 degrees. Moments later, Suleiman Sarraj entered, carrying a copper tray loaded with iced drinks. He set it on the edge of the desk, removed a tan folder from the top drawer, and sat down. The guard stationed himself against the wall at the prisoner's back. "How are you, Dov?" Sarraj asked, with the familiarity developed during previous interrogations. "Just fine. I'm in a beautiful suite on one of the lower levels. It's got everything. A blanket, a gallon can, room service, meals delivered directly to my door. You ought to stop by sometime." "Oh, Dov," Sarraj said, shaking his head. "I thought a few weeks at Tadmor would convince you further resistance is quite futile. Evidently, I was mistaken." He took one of the drinks in his hand and almost spilled it. The condensation on the outside of the glass made it slippery. "Or maybe my men have been too gentle. In any event, it seems they've failed to show you exactly how serious I am." A drop of perspiration rolled down Dov's nose and onto his shirt. The dry heat invaded every cavity of his body. There was pressure on the sockets of his eyes. His mouth was viscid, his nostrils parched. His throat felt like someone had run sandpaper along its inner walls. "Give me a drink, Sarraj." The second bureau chief set his glass down. "I'm sorry, I can't do that. At least not yet. But as soon as you begin cooperating, you shall have a glass of courtesan. It's a local specialty, made by soaking licorice roots in water for several days. The result, chilled, is quite delicious. I'm sure you'll find it." "Why don't you just kill me and get it over with?" Dov shouted. "I'm afraid that would do neither of us much good. Besides, you are too young to lose your life. Believe me, at 26, you've barely begun. I know. I have a son and daughter about your age. There was paternal warmth in his voice. I don't want to see you dead. As I told you before, I want to help you, send you back to Israel. In fact, let me do something now, as a gesture of good faith. Siraj reached behind him and flipped a switch on the wall. The whine of an electric motor sounded overhead, and the black blades of the fan, suspended from the ceiling, gradually picked up speed. Dov shivered as a stream of hot air glanced off his sweaty brow. Is that better? He nodded. Good. Now tell me, what do you know about the former Nazis living in Damascus? Which Nazis? How did you penetrate the German colony here? Siraj demanded impatiently. Dov's lips curved into a smile. I just asked where I could find the best knockwurst and sauerkraut in town. Siraj drummed his fingers on the desk. If you persist in this manner, I'll have the answer beaten out of you. I will ask just one more time. How did you penetrate the Nazi colony? A long silence followed. Siraj stood up. You are a fool. You will regret this, I promise you. He motioned to the guard and left the room. The soldier closed the door behind Siraj, then turned towards the prisoner. Over here, he said. Dov lowered himself to the ground and looked over to where the Arab pointed. 2 wrist shackles were bolted into the wall just above the casing. As he moved near, the guard grabbed his shoulder, pushed him face forward against the door, lifted his right hand, locked it inside the manacle, then did the same with his left. Dov hung over the door. The wood felt warm where it was pressed against his cheek. He heard the sound of the kirbash beating the air. Then abruptly the first blow ripped into his infected calves. The bull's hair shredded his prison garment and the outer layer of his skin with one stroke. Dov bit his lower lip hard. Again and again the guard lashed at the back of his legs, cutting through tendon and muscle, bloodying his whip. Dov tore at the shackles, writhing in agony. Streams of sweat ran down his face. He smelled the salt odor of tears in his nose. The guard paused for a moment, stepped to his left, then sent the ends of the kirbash slicing through the side of Dov's knee. The second blow struck the exposed peroneal nerve. Excruciating pain clawed down Dov's leg and exploded into his foot. His tongue caught in his throat. He screamed without restraint. The door opened. Siraj stood there for a long time, studying the boy's face. Finally he spoke in a soft voice. Have you had enough? Dov turned his head away. Take him down, Siraj said to the guard. When Dov was seated on the stool, Siraj reached into his desk and withdrew a gun. It was an FN Browning .45 caliber high-power automatic pistol, manufactured in Belgium under license as a copy of the American original. He circled around the desk and faced the young Israeli. I have lost my patience, Elon. I did not bring you to El Masa for you to waste more of my time. We have reached the turning point in our discussions. Either you begin cooperating or you will not leave this room alive. His voice was flat. Dov felt the control of his mind slipping. His head throbbed. And the thirst. Siraj, give me something to drink, he cried out. Siraj sensed that he was on the verge of victory. He lowered the Browning to his side. He had now only to apply the coup de grace. But he would edge toward his final threat. He knew better than to spoil his advantage by proceeding too quickly. Why did the colonel send you to Syria? Please, Siraj, my legs. Let me lie down. In a minute. There's a doctor waiting in the next room. As soon as I have the information I want, you shall have treatment, a bed, food. Now tell me, how did you penetrate the Nazi colony? No, he whispered, weakening. Moisture built in his eyes. Come on, Dov. Talk, and it will be over for you. In a few days, you'll be home. Think about it. No more beatings, an end to the pain. Dov licked his lower lip. It was bleeding. Nobody ever holds out under prolonged torture. You've been here for 5 months. The Colonel will understand. Nobody will blame you. You'll be considered a hero for lasting as long as you did. Please, don't make me use the pistol. You made a special effort to seek out the Nazis. Tell me, did Ludwig Streicher help you? I can't, he shouted, burying his head in his arms, waiting, wanting to die. Siraj moved next to the chair, gun in hand. You leave me little choice. Dov looked up. The pistol was pointed at his elbow. In one terrible instant, he realized Siraj was not threatening to kill him. You wouldn't. The bullets for this pistol are .45s. Notches have been sliced into the ends. They'll shatter on impact. Why did you come to Syria? The Colonel sent me. I know that, Siraj said, anger in his voice scratching his words. Why? I can't tell you. I'm not bluffing. Siraj pushed the muzzle of the Browning against Dov's skin. Who is your contact in Damascus? I have no contact there. You're lying. Who is Operative 66? At the mention of the highly placed Israeli agent, terror swept through Dov. How had Siraj known? It was impossible. But no time to think now. He had to focus his will against Siraj. Defy him. Resist. That's all that mattered. I'll give you one last chance. I want the identity of Operative 66. Silence. I want his name, Siraj screamed. Now! Dov stared into his eyes. I'll never tell you, he said, gritting his teeth. Siraj pulled the trigger. The sound exploding in such close quarters was deafening. Pieces of flesh splattered the wall. Blood gushed from the open wound. Dov's arm, hanging from the elbow by a piece of membrane, swayed in the air. Then the skin tore, and it fell to the ground. Get a doctor, Siraj shouted at the guard. I don't want him dying.